The research article I have chosen to do my oral presentation on is called Spanking and Child Development Across the First Decade of Life, and it was published in 2013. Let's begin by looking at a little bit of background and knowledge around this subject. So corporal punishment is a form of physical discipline that is intended to cause physical pain. Patinsky, 2006. So an example of this would be hitting or spanking a child as a consequence when they have appeared to do the wrong thing or are displaying an undesirable behaviour. There is a large debate on the effectiveness of corporal punishment in nations and cultures all around the world, with some people believing it brings about positive behavioural change and other people being of the opinion that it actually creates negative or violent behaviours, believing it is unethical or an immoral way to discipline children. And we can thank Chioka 2017 for that information. So the aim of the study is to look at to investigate how often a sample group of parents carried out corporal punishment on their children and how the frequency of this discipline had a positive or negative effect on the child's externalizing behaviours. It was hypothesized that the use of corporal punishment during early childhood would lead to long-term violent behaviours. The rationale of this study was to provide more concrete scientific evidence to the parenting debate that had previously only been supported with opinion. So the methods and design of this study. This study used data from the Fragile Families and Child Wellbeing Study, which we'll refer to as the FFCW. So the FFCW was a longitudinal birth cohort study which encompassed 4,200 participants and their families from across 20 different US cities. The children in this study were born between 1998 and 2000. However, the study that I'm focusing on only takes data information from this study, the FFCW study. So the study that I'm focusing on actually encompasses 1,933 participants, and this was limited to valid responses from parents. So that's why it's not quite all the participants from the FFW study. So this study involved each of the participants being contacted when their children were aged 3 and 5 years old, and they were asked questions in an interview setting to determine how often they spanked their children. Now the answers were transferred to a scale, and this scale can be seen on the screen. So we've got 3 categories. The first one is no spanking in the past month, second one spanking once a week or less, and spanking twice a week or more. Now the way the externalizing behaviours were recorded was on Ankenbach and Rascola's Child Behavioural Checklist, the CBCL, and that can be referenced in the year 2000. So the CBCL is grouped into 8 different areas. The study that I'm focusing on focuses on the areas 1, which is aggressive behaviour, and area 4, which is rule-breaking behaviour. Now, parents were asked to rate the likeliness of a series of both aggressive and rule-breaking behaviours on this scale, and that's how their child's behaviour was determined. The results of this study show that there was a strong correlation between parents who use corporal punishment as a means of disciplining their children and the child's level of aggressive and rule-breaking behaviour. Thus, we could say that the hypothesis was fulfilled. Many of the parents who reported spanking their children twice or more times a week on the scale, or in that category, at both 3 and 5 years of age, also reported high levels of aggressive behaviour at 9 years of age. These results were compared to parents who reported they did not use corporal punishment on their children at all, and thus their children showed lower levels of rule-breaking and aggressive behaviour. So I guess you could say in this study that those parents who didn't use corporal punishment at all was kind of like a control group that we could compare the other parenting to. The conclusion was that there was a strong link, as we said, between spanking and aggressive behaviour in children. The implication of this study is that parents need to be better informed of the negative effects that frequent corporal punishment could have on their children. A future direction we could take is the potential need for parental education on the promotion of positive affirmations in encouraging desired behaviours rather than negative punishment to prevent undesired behaviours. Some future research questions we could ask are, do positive reinforcements encourage positive behaviour outcomes, or is punishment effective in bringing about positive long-term behavioural change if it's not of a corporal nature? So some critiques of this study is a weakness of the method is that completing such long-term research does not take into account the other variables that may affect the data. So as the behaviour of children in this study was only considered on one day, so as a 3-year-old, one day was taken into consideration to ask what their behaviour was like. So the results could be based off how the child was acting on that day or that particular morning, or maybe how the parents were feeling on that day. Maybe a more vindictive way of determining the child's behaviour across their childhood, that their small childhood span, is reviewing a child's behaviour every 3 months, and then you might have more of an accurate representation. Of course, this would be more difficult to carry out as it would take more time and money. Another limitation of the results of the study is that parents may have altered their answers to appear to be better or more caring. Thus, the results would be obscured and inaccurate in their reflection. As this study is subjective, then the variance in the perception of each parent as to what behaviours are classed as aggressive may also be a limitation, as each parent may have a different perspective on what aggressive behaviour is, or if their child is likely to do that and how often. Finally, here is a reference list. Feel free to pause on this longer if you need a look at it. Thank you for listening.